Talking Buffalo Bills, Pat. I had a blast looking at some of the research I did. This is past Buffalo Bills drafts. Some of the best, some of the worst, some of the players that went. As you look back on the history of the Bills, what sticks out to you as far as the Bills' ability to draft?
I mean, well, it depends on what era you're talking, right? If you're talking 1983 up until 1994, the Bills were unbelievably unstoppable. Like some of the names you pull out there, Jim Kelly, obviously, Thurman Thomas, Bruce Smith, the first overall pick. But you have diamonds in the rough, your Andre Reeds, right? Guys that show up and end up being Hall of Famers. I mean, Cornelius Bennett's a draft trade. He didn't draft it. But just the names of these defenses and offenses that live on littered with stars. And then right after you draft Todd Collins and you start moving in that direction, the Todd Collins, Eric Moulds era, right? It becomes a complete tire fire. Like, it is a disaster, the names that you see in the top three rounds. And if you're not a diehard Bills fan from the year, I'm going to say, I'll say 1997 until just within the last few years, you have no idea who's half of these people are drafted in the first three rounds.
Well, so it's funny. One of the ones that I singled out, I don't know if these players mean a lot to you. It was 1976. Is that a little too early? The Bills,
give it a shot.
The Bills off the top of this draft took Mario Clark, Ken Jones, Joe Devlin, and Ben Williams with their first four picks. Those guys were all impact players. This is one of the best drafts in their history. And some oddities there. There were 23 players the Bills chose in 17 rounds. They had 15 picks in the first 9 rounds that year. There was like some real craziness going on. But those players were guys that were still there in the 80-81 teams, the Joe Ferguson, Joe Cribbs teams, that made the playoffs. That was a great draft. Just one of many, Pat.
Yeah, but I think, that goes to show you how different the NFL was, where you could draft someone in 1976, a whole core of a team, and have them still be there 7 years later, guaranteed to help you make a step forward, right? Like, it's so weird now that we talk about this rookie window, right? We, the Bills, have to be successful within the next 3 years, or else you're out of money, and you got to hope Josh Allen sticks around long enough where it catches you on the back end. I mean, different eras, man.
But wait a minute, Bill. Back then, they had like how many rounds? Like 17 rounds?
Well, it was 17. They drafted Ernie Davis, 1962, with their number one pick. Ernie Davis, of course, went to Syracuse University and contracted leukemia, never played in the NFL. He died before the season started.
Which, by the way, is one of the saddest stories ever, because all he wanted to do, now, was it before the season started or was it during the season? Because he wanted to dress and play for the... Okay, I'm sorry.
At least he was sick prior to the season. I'm not exactly sure when it was he passed.
I remember hearing a story that all he wanted in the world was to put on a Browns uniform and play a snap in the NFL, because that was his dream, and he never got to do it. Whereas if he would have signed that AFL contract, it's not the NFL, but he would have had a game of professional football if that's what his dying wish was.
Yeah, and again, if you don't know the story, he won the Heisman Trophy at Syracuse in 1961, and then was drafted by the Browns and the Bills in '62, and he never played in the NFL because he passed a leukemia, which was detected obviously after the draft. The Bills had drafted him fourth that year. I think he was the number one overall in the NFL, but that is a sad story. But again, I think we agree that probably the Kelly Reed draft was the best ever.
Well, let's see what happens with Josh Allen, right? You could have Josh Allen, Tremaine Edmonds, and talk to me in 15 years, and we'll see how it goes, man.
And I like revisionist history too. This is one thing that I've always thought about. When they drafted Jim Kelly, the Bills probably never get to a Super Bowl if Kelly doesn't go to the USFL.
Yep.
Because he plays in Houston for a couple of seasons. The Bills are so bad they get to draft Bruce Smith. And then all the pieces fall together, and suddenly they're the super team. But if Kelly purports right to Buffalo, the Bills never get Bruce Smith, and they probably don't get to a Super Bowl.